So chapter 6, text 26. This particular verse is very, very relevant for chanting Hare Krishna, especially with focus and doing anything really in life. But while meditating, this really helps because when we are chanting, the mind wanders. So here it says, from wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. So the nature of the mind. One thing to note here is in chapter 6, Krishna is going to give a lot of different descriptions of the mind. Driravrata, flickering over here. What's a flickering translation? Chanchalam, Chanchalam Imanaha Krishna. So Chanchalam. So there are different descriptions of the mind that Krishna gives. So one of the things mentioned here is Chanchalam, or it's flickering. So if you see candlelight, it's flickering, constantly moving. But as there is like wind, it moves here and there, more so, right? Too much wind, it'll blow off. So similarly, our mind is also constantly here and there. This desire, that desire, this thought, that thought, this past, future, present, etc. It's always wandering here and there, up and down, round and round. But Krishna is saying wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering nature, it is nature of the mind to wander, right? And unsteady nature, this flickering and unsteady, one must certainly withdraw it. Just like a child running around, the mother or the father says, come back here, please, time for dinner. You're going to sit here and you're going to eat dinner, right? So similarly, kind of bringing back the mind, come back. You're chanting Hare Krishna and you're thinking, today I'm going to wear this clothes, today I'm going to cook this food, today, tomorrow, oh, why didn't I think of that? But Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, 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 right? It keeps happening. So Krishna is saying that the moment you realize you're out of focus, right, bring back the mind. So this is a technique of chanting that as soon as, because you won't notice that your mind is wandering, you're thinking of something, oh, I'm chanting also. Oh, okay, that happens. So once you realize I'm chanting, this is very important. Okay, bring back the mind. Let me focus on Hare Krishna, present in the current, right? Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. So withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Under the control of the self means doing what you want to do rather than doing what the mind wants you to do. Now, how do we know what we want and what the mind wants? Can anybody answer that question? What's the difference? There are no right or wrong answers, we're all family, just share.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
I think that we want always to be in control and the mind wants to make us like in the mind's control. Is that correct understanding?
Yeah, that is correct. But what I'm asking is, how do you know the difference between what is your desire and what is the mind forcing you to do?
Because sometimes when we are in a powerful or a good position, we can control the desire and control the mind and say that we won't go there, which is actually making a difference that we are different and the mind is giving us certain things or giving us some desires which we can control, which we can take control. And
Okay.
We cannot...
Okay. Anybody else wants to answer that? How do you know the difference between we wanting something and the mind influencing us to want something? Yes, Shivam, go ahead.
Yes, Prabhuji. So the mind always gets attracted to the Maya, and like I'm just trying
Don't give
to,
me theory,
I'm not
Shivam.
sure.
Give me practical answers.
Practical.
Practically, how do you understand? This is my mind telling me to do. This is something I want to do.
Okay.
I and the mind,
so,
how are we different?
Yes. So, like just an example, suppose there is a desert, my mind will get attracted to it, and I personally I don't want to eat that, but my mind will tell to, like eat that. So that's the difference between mind and intelligence, suppose.
Okay, all right. Yes,
Yeah.
Venkatesh, I know you're smiling.
No, it's. I'll just take something from what you said a couple of weeks back. It's like just this one time. Let me do this. I will not do that after that. It's just once. So that's the mind telling you to override what you actually want to do. So I'm just picking from what you said. Like
Hmm.
that is the mind. Like this one time. After that, I'll be all fine. This one time I'll have this. One time I'll do this. This is that overriding thing that
Correct.
makes you do this stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so for me, it's like in the morning, I'm like, I should be exercising right now. Like, okay, maybe a little later, maybe after breakfast, maybe tomorrow, right? So I want to exercise. I want to be fit. I want to lose my double chin, but my mind is saying, oh, why don't you do something else, something more priority, right? So there is two conversations happening between us, and we should first identify the fact that that is happening. Otherwise, we'll think the mind is us only. The mind is not us. The mind is an influence on us. It's like of having a friend, good or bad, uncontrolled mind, worst enemy, controlled mind, best friend, who's constantly telling us, hey, what about this? What about that? Try this. Not now. Come on. Who told you you have to be all this and that? Something, we know something we should be doing right. Nobody's looking. So what? Right? There's two voices. I know I should be doing this. And there's the other side of me that's telling me, so one time, no problem. It's okay. And you rationalize. That's the mind. So we need to identify what is me, what is the mind. Only then we will tell the mind to, hey, mind, stop doing this. Hey, mind, stop wandering. Let me focus. I and the mind, we are separate. Right? At the initial stage, we don't even recognize that we are not this mind. Is there anybody else who wants to share something about the difference between I and the mind?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Yogesh Prabhu.
So my understanding is that we are driven by knowledge and intellect, whereas the mind is driven by desire. So there is a constant conflict there, is my understanding. Is that right?
What is your understanding based on?
From what I remember, that is. I mean, I don't remember the exact source, but this
So
is what I
intelligence
remember.
is a separate entity. It's a tool. It's kind of like the processor, the Pentium processor, right? Binary, 1 0 1 0 1 0. Yes, no, yes, no. It's discerning. Mind is saying, I want to jump. Intelligence saying, don't jump. You might hurt yourself. You might kill yourself, right? The example I always keep giving, and I give the same example so it gets etched in our head. So the intelligence is not me. The mind is not me. The ego is a false sense of identity, which I'm thinking I'm this body, this is my mother, this is my country, this is mine. That's a false sense of identity. And then there is the I, the soul, right? That's distinct from intelligence and mind. It is hard to distinguish between the ego and the I. That's much later. The ego is the last to go, right? But at least we should, at our stage where we are, we should start observing. This is me, my desire, me wanting to do this. This is my mind telling me to do something else. I want to work on my whatever skills. Mind is saying later, maybe. I want to get the deadline done. Mind is saying, come on, watch a movie now, right? Not feeling too up for it. It's too bored. I'm too tired. Now that we recognize it, with that understanding, from wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Now that we understand it, it's like, I'm doing this, I'm thinking of something else, I'm distracted. My 100% focus is not here. Without 100% focus, you cannot do anything right in life, right? Imagine reading a legal contract. Most of you are startup entrepreneurs. I'm guessing, if not, you should be spending a lot of your time reading fine prints, reading legal contracts, reading your patent applications or whatever else, right? And that is a lot of legalese. You miss one word, that can come to bite you 15 years from now or 6 months from now, right? I just found out one of my employees didn't sign a document that he was supposed to sign, and he is using it to his advantage. And I'm like, how did they miss out on that? Somehow we were distracted. Anyway, point is very important. So focus is super important, but how do you know how to focus? You're reading it and your mind is like, man, that biryani was so good. And then from that thought of biryani, you went to your grandmother used to make something. And then from that thought, you're thinking about that movie that you watched, and you're reading. Oh, back to the words. Did I miss something? Right? Happens. But unless you recognize it, you don't come back. So to bring it back. So flickering, unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. So chanting Hare Krishna, mind going here and there, come back to the syllable Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Right? Bring it back. And that's where you're training it. Not only you're getting, purified by the potency of Krishna's holy name, you're also training the mind to be in the present, to be where you want it to be. Just like a child, you train the child. When I tell you this, it means I mean business. Sometimes, the mother is like, beta, don't touch fire. Right? And child will be like, oh, it's okay. She doesn't mean it. I'll just put my finger on the fire. Beta, I told you, don't touch fire. It's okay. I'll try. It's fun. Every time I touch fire, mother talks to me. She gives me attention. Third time, I told you not to touch the fire. Oh, okay. She means business. Right? So child learns when there is anger, that means this is like, okay, I'm really crossed the line. This means next thing could be beating. You should never beat your child. That's not what I'm saying here. All I'm saying is there is a way to train the child. The child figures out, okay, this means really like, okay, I've crossed the line. Similarly, the mind is like a child. Sometimes they call it a monkey also. But in this case, let's call it a child. And the child needs to be trained. So when you're training it, like, when I want you to be present, you need to be present. This is important time. Chanting Hare Krishna, or I'm reading a legal contract, or I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita, or I'm interacting with somebody who's very special, very dear to me. I want to give them 100% focus, right? The worst thing, if you've ever gotten on a date that women hate, is when men check out other women while dating somebody. Horrible, horrible thing. And we men, not women, men, it's our nature. We always, subconsciously, somebody walking by, we check them out. It's not nice. And I have seen my spiritual master, oh my God, when he talks to someone, his eyes are glued to their eyes and the world can go to hell. Doesn't matter. He is there 100% listening, talking, focusing. Somebody might slam the door. Somebody might drop something. Nothing in the world exists. It's just you. And when you feel that kind of attention, you really feel the love that, I'm so special, that he is giving me full attention, 100% attention. Versus, imagine a meeting, forget checking out other people, right? Checking out your phone, looking at the watch. I do it sometimes when I want to let somebody know I don't have time. I need to move on. I'll look at the watch and hope they will recognize it. And sometimes I have to do that. Sometimes, some few days ago, I had to ask Sarva to call me because this person just wasn't leaving me. And so now I live a very, very public life. So sometimes I have to take advantage of it, but I don't like to do that. I like to give a person 100%, but there are also time wasters. But what I'm saying is, when there is an important person, when there is something you give value to, not a time wasting exercise, but something of value, even then we see we are not there 100%. It's unfortunate, right? Because we are missing out. We're missing out on that opportunity. When I was first preaching and started preaching in college in the US, I would hear the recordings of my mentors' lectures. And these were lectures I was personally present in. When I would hear the recording, I was shocked that I only heard 30% of what he said, retained 30% of what he said. Rest sounded like, what? He spoke this in class? I don't remember it. What was I doing? I was sitting in the first bench. I was listening, but I was not listening, right? That's how the mind works. It's constantly wandering. And so much is going on and you don't observe, you don't see things. Now, coming back again to our practical example here, some of the smartest people I have seen in my life, spiritual and non-spiritual, just one glance and they can absorb so much subtleties, right? Micro expressions on the face, some conversation that's happening, the body language of what's happening. Simultaneously, they're talking, right? Just to give you an example, not example, this is like a tip since all of you are entrepreneurs and leaders in your own strength. When you're having a meeting in a conference room, it's a good idea to sit. So if this is the conference room, let's say, and the door is over there, you should be diametrically opposite to the door, right? The reason is you should know who's coming in, when they're coming in, who's leaving, who's sitting next to the door. So they want to leave early, right? Because as a boss, you're supposed to observe everything, not like you comment on it always, but you should observe who are the interested folks, who are not the interested folks, who's taking it casually, body language, everything. Because the more you absorb, the more informed decisions you make. And guess what? You're going to miss out on it if you're not present. A lot of times I see people completely not present. They're talking and somebody else is having facial, non-verbal communication, and they're not even noticing, right? But I notice these things and it helps me so much. I know who's planning behind my back. Not saying I'm like always in detective mode, but when you're running businesses and when you are somebody important, I'm not saying I'm important, but when you're somebody, to certain people you're important, there are going to be some people who like you. There are going to be some people who don't like you as much. And you need to be aware if something is cooking behind your back, right? And that requires observation, hearing, observing, noticing difference in behavior, noticing difference in patterns, noticing body language changes, tonal changes. If somebody's going through difficulties in their life, that's going to affect their job, right? You need to notice it. And you need to, either help them, motivate them, or tell them to take a break or whatever it needs. Because if they're not happy at home, that will screw up their job and they're going to make mistakes and you're going to pay for it. So you better know what's happening, right? So it's mind flickering nature, bringing it back is not just about chanting Hare Krishna or spiritual activities. It's about everything we do, important things that we do in our lives, right? Very, very important skill to have. Doesn't happen in a day, doesn't happen in a week, takes considerable amount of time. Months, you will see difference. Years, you'll see huge difference. Decades, you will find yourself in that movie. What's it called? Come on, tell me, what's the name of that movie? That girl who was like using 100% of her brain.
Lucy.
Lucy, that's right. Right? So couple of decades of doing this, you'll find yourself in that Lucy. So when I watched that movie, Lucy, I'm not saying I'm at 100% utilization, but it's very, I could appreciate where I was and how much I absorb things in the world, and that's what this Bhagavad Gita is telling us, chapter 6 is telling us. When you have control over your mind, it is actually superhuman powers you have, and that is nothing superhuman. It's like everybody has that potential. It's just we are too distracted to use our mind thoroughly. But practicing this of bringing the mind back to the present, from the past, from the future, bringing it back to the present, allows you for the mind to be in the present. When you're in the present, you can observe, you can conclude, and based on that, make decisions. Coming to the next verse, 27. Any questions so far on this verse? Just let me see the chat section. Lakshmi Sharma, we can be focused by being conscious. Right. Okay, if there are no questions, somebody wants to read the next verse, 27.
Yes, Prabhuji. Prashanta manasam hai enam yoginam sukam uttamam Upaiti shanta rajasam brahma bhutam akalmasham. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest happiness by virtue of his identity with Brahman. He is liberated, his mind is peaceful, his passions are quieted, and he is freed from sin. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, I don't know what version of Bhagavad Gita do you use, because the translation is slightly different. You might have an older version. Just let me know.
As it is, Prabhuji, I use Bhagavad Gita as it is. AC Bhaktivedanta
Is it
Swami
the
Prabhupada.
red version?
Yes, Prabhuji. Red and sky
That's
blue.
why. So just for everybody to know, the red version of the Bhagavad Gita as it is has certain, so there was a lawsuit long time ago, and there was a ISKCON divided into another section, and some people who had that lawsuit were allowed in the court to have that Bhagavad Gita, and they couldn't make any changes after 1972, right? There were a lot of corrections that were made, because what happened was Srila Prabhupada would translate the Bhagavad Gita in a dictaphone. He would record it, and he had a very strong Bengali accent. So a lot of times Westerners would hear it and type it and make mistakes. Sometimes there'll be grammatical mistakes, sometimes there'll be just mishearing certain words. The red Bhagavad Gita, that has all the mistakes. The Bhagavad Gita that has gone through certain revisions, the essence is same, but the grammatical and the corrected mistakes have been fixed, just so you know. Also, there are certain people who translate it who use their own judgment also. I'm giving you this background so you know. Certain people heard Prabhupada say certain things that were a little controversial. Later on, it was found that they crossed off those parts of the purport, and they never got published in the red version. But later on, when devotees heard Prabhupada's dictaphone recordings, they found out that many things were not included. So those were put back in the print edition. So that's why that's why I could tell you of the red version. That is right. That is fine. That is the updated version, but the red version cannot change as a result of that lawsuit that was there. And these people call themselves ISKCON, and they do have temples, but they are not ISKCON. So there is also a lawsuit, another infringement of copyright. So they say Prabhupada's ISKCON, right? Because they're actually not ISKCON. They believe that Prabhupada was the last teacher, and there can be no teachers after him in entire Kali Yuga, which is not what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 4, Krishna is very clear, evam parampara praptam, right? Guru Shishya parampara. That's our system. Shishya becomes Guru, and then he has Shishyas, and then those Shishyas become Guru. Generation after generation, Guru Shishya goes on. So this other version of ISKCON, they have a different opinion where they sit in front of Srila Prabhupada's deity and get initiated on their own. Now the Guru should have the right to say, you're not qualified yet to be initiated. Take more time and come back. But when you sit in front of Prabhupada, he's not going to say that. So as a result, that is not the most accurate, So it happens in any religious group. There is always deformities that occur. So this group of persons who call themselves Prabhupada's ISKCON are, unfortunately, has gone in a certain direction. You should be aware of it, that there is a difference, and we should follow what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, not what certain people think. Anyway, not trying to make this controversial, but it's my duty to educate us. Ragini Mataji, if you have other questions, you can always talk to me on the phone, and I'll be happy to answer it in more further details. All right, coming back. Okay, the yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. So now Krishna talks about initially fixing your mind, bringing the mind back. Now he's saying the yogi whose mind is fixed on me, right? Prashanta manasam hi enam. Prashanta, peaceful, right? So you're peaceful. When your mind is fixed, mind is not saying do this, do that, do this, do that, constantly making you do stuff, right? You're fixed, you're happy, you're content to where you are. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains highest perfection of transcendental happiness. So only when there is peace, there is happiness, prashanta, right? When you're peaceful, only then you can be happy. If you're not peaceful, you cannot be happy. Agree, disagree? And don't just agree blindly. Feel free to disagree if that doesn't make sense, right? The Bhagavad Gita, actually, Krishna is showing us. It's Q&A. It's back and forth. We are not a dogmatic religion. You should always question. And Arjun asks the same question like 3 times, 4 times. Chapter 3, chapter 5, chapter 6. Krishna answers multiple times, right? So that's our process. We're not dogmatic. You're going to hell if you don't follow this. That's not how we do things. In our case, we logically, conclusively come to understanding. Thereby, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, we understand.
Sorry, Prabhu, can I ask a question, please?
Please.
Prabhu, of course, I understand, like, focusing mind on Krishna gives us peace, but people worship, like, God with different names, and they also get peace when they are worshiping God with different names and different religions also. So,
right.
What explains that?
Krishna and Allah, what's the difference? What's the difference? No difference, right? You focus on God, whether you call him by his different names, what does it matter? Whether you call him Ram, whether you call him Krishna, whether you call him Allah or Jehovah or Buddha, there's no difference. You'll find peace, you'll find happiness.
But like at the same time, say, like for Bhagwan Shiv, I think what in his con we say, like, Bhagwan Shivji is a bhakt of Krishna. He's separate to Krishna, right? So, are we saying, like, say Krishna or Allah or Jehovah, they are same, but Bhagwan Shiv is separate to Krishna?
So you say Bhagwan. I have not seen the word Bhagwan Shiv in Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam.
Okay, yeah, sure, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So Lord Shiva is Shiv Tattva. He's his own category. He's not Bhagavat Tattva. He's not Vishnu Tattva. He's Shiva Tattva. He's his own category of his own. So can you worship Lord Shiva? Absolutely. Can you meditate and feel peace in Lord Shiva? Absolutely. Why not? Krishna's devotee, no difference, right? Can you find peace in meditating on Narad Muni? Certainly. Krishna's pure devotee. No questions about it.
Okay. So
as long as you're aligned in the system. Now, if you start thinking of Sai Baba as God, or if you start thinking of, I don't know, so many gods out there, Kalki, some new age Kalki, there are 300 of them, right? As God, now you're screwed. You will be in, I don't know what kind of peace, right? That'll be a different level of peace. And that won't last too long. But when you're fixed on proper understanding of God, whether it's whatever religion it might be, doesn't matter. That's the way to happiness.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Krishna.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to know the actual definition of peace, because like there are a lot of definitions which we see. Some people think that sitting in front of nature is peace, or someone thinks that a good relationship is peaceful, or someone thinks that having a good sleep is peaceful. So actually, what is the correct definition of peace?
When his mind is not bothering you, that is peace. When your mind is fixed, that's what Krishna is saying, right? Prashanta. Shanta means peaceful. Prashanta means really peaceful, transcendental peaceful. When does that happen? When the mind is in control. Otherwise, the mind is like chuk, 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 chuk. You have a 3-story house, he has a 4-story house. You have a Hyundai, he has a BMW. You have, whatever, 1 wife, he has 4 wives. Right? Mind is always comparing and chuk, 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 it goes on. That's not peaceful. When the mind is in control, whatever situation you're in, you're chilled.
Yes, sir. Actually, like this is so seems so impossible, but that is why I think I've never thought of like this. Thank you.
So it requires detachment, It requires, so that's where Krishna is taking us as we're learning through these verses, right? So we have come to that point. By learning about Krishna, by learning about we are not this body, we are spirit, soul, by learning about we are not this mind, we are a separate entity, we are realizing these things don't matter as much. By learning that there is going to be happiness and distress, we are realizing, oh, today this party is in power, tomorrow that party is going to be in power. Today I am not so rich, tomorrow I am going to be rich. Day after I might not be so rich. Today I have good looks, tomorrow I might not be good looks. Everything is changing. And then you realize, oh, everything is on this platform is meant to change. So it's going to work out.
Got it, sir.
So the yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme. Qualitative identity with the Supreme. That means I am Krishna-like. Qualitative means Sat Chit Ananda. Krishna is also Sat Chit Ananda. I am also Sat Chit Ananda. Except, what's the difference? Anybody knows between Krishna and us?
We are a tiny drop in a mighty ocean.
Correct. So our Sat is infinitesimal. His Sat is infinite. It's eternally present everywhere as Brahma Jyoti. And we are present only where we are localized. Our Chit, our consciousness, conscious of us. He is conscious of every single living entity in this creation, not just universe, creation. Ananda. We are having 500 friends on Facebook and maybe 10 people that we know, and that's what our happiness is, that relationship. Krishna is enjoying Ananda, interacting with unlimited living entities throughout creation. So everything, so like Prabhupada explains, gold on a ring and gold in the mine. It's the same gold, same quality. Quantity is less on the ring, quantity is a lot in the gold mine. So that's the thing. So qualitatively, he is beyond mode of passion. So Rajasa, beyond mode of passion, that means goodness. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he's freed from all reactions of past deeds. Now, coming back to Krishanu's question again, right? If you're in Rajasic mode or Tamasic mode, passion or ignorance, you cannot be peaceful. Because passion means you get easily bored. You get easily like this, now I need another distraction, that. Now I need another distraction, this, right? I need to achieve this. I need to show off that. Constantly, I need attention. Everybody, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? And to show everybody who's the boss. I'm the alpha male here, hello, right? That's mode of passion. Mode of goodness is, doesn't matter who recognizes me, who doesn't. My life's remote control is in my hands. Mode of passion is, my life's remote control is all of your hands. Unless you share, unless you like, unless you comment on my post, I feel worthless. Only when you give me attention, I feel I'm worthwhile. Only when you give me an award, I feel worthwhile. Without that award, I feel worthless. That's mode of passion. Mode of goodness, sattvic is, I don't need your validation. I realize I'm qualitatively same as God. Wow. I'm a spark of God. I'm a spark of Krishna. I don't need anybody's validation. I'm divine. Krishna says, you're awesome. Ascharyavat. That's what we see. A soul in the elephant body can lift trees, literally, like stones, and huge capacity. A soul in an ant body can lift 6 times its body weight, apparently. A soul in coronavirus can wipe out a huge part of the world population. The soul is powerful. It's a spark of God. Put it into right use. You can pretty much create an airplane. You can create artificial intelligence. You can create startups that are making billions of dollars. Or you can create bombs that kills lots of lives. The soul is very powerful. And we are that divine being. That's our definition. That's our self-worth. We don't need somebody else to like and share our comments. Of course, it's nice to have that. I'm all over social media, so I'm not saying you shouldn't be. All I'm saying is that should not, when I was kind of getting started with social media. My mentor called me one day. I was in Delhi, and he said, "Avello, I see people are liking, sharing your things. Wonderful comments coming. I feel very proud of you. Wonderful. But don't let this be your self-worth. The moment you start identifying with it, that's when you come under control of other people. Because today they're glorifying you. Tomorrow you make one mistake, people are going to throw you right down the trash, right? And you're going to be depressed and finished. That's what happens to people who get, carried away by name, fame, glory. Do not get carried away by it. Use it as a way to propagate Krishna consciousness and entrepreneurship as you're doing. But don't get entangled by it. Don't, if somebody doesn't treat you nicely, that should not depress you. Do you know who I am? Generally we know, right? In India, we're like, do you know who my dad is? Who don't know who my uncle is? That's not something that a sattvic person needs. I have my self-worth. I don't need to identify with my dad, uncle, money, good looks, designations. Nah, I'm part of God. Done and dusted. That's good enough. So that's what our self-esteem is. Nobody can break us. When we have our self-worth, we don't need anybody's validation. The moment you look for validation, you're weak, right? People will not validate you who are envious of you. They'll find faults in you and you'll feel like, oh, I'm not good enough. Okay. I want to go back to the previous verse, something I should have mentioned, but I didn't. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada very beautifully talks about two words, Goswami and Godas, right? So Goswami, so you must be knowing sannyasis and whatnot. They're called Swami, such and such Swami, or such and such Goswami. Go means senses. Swami means master, right? So those who have control over their senses are called Goswamis. Those who are controlled by their senses are called Godas, right? So initially, materially speaking, most people are controlled by their senses, by their mind, by their whatever external things are, by their friends. And when you get controlled, you're Godas. You're a servant of the senses. When you have the freedom to choose what you want to do, and the power, the willpower, the mind power to do what you want to do, then you're Goswami. Srila Prabhupada was once in a cab. I've shared this with you before, but I'll share it again. And one cab driver said, "Oh, you're a Swami in New York, I think. Can you show me some magic? Can you walk on water?" Prabhupada said, "No, but you can put me in a room full of naked women and I will not be agitated." Because those people who show magic, guess what? When it comes to sex desire, that's where they fall short. They cannot control their mind and senses. But the person, who is fully controlled, they will not be agitated no matter who is around. What is the situation, right? Who are the friends? What are you seeing? That doesn't affect you. Internally, you're rooted in your identity with your divinity and the divinity of Krishna. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like we have some of the knowledge from the past. So that is the intellect, right? So, but sometimes based on the situation, we have to react based on the situation. So is it the EQ or say the emotions that controlling us, or is it the knowledge? So I'm just confused with these two things again.
It's both, right? Because what's happening is when the mind is not controlled, emotion means the mind. So mind comes in the way. They said this, how dare they? Because mind identifies you as something. The intelligence comes in, I shouldn't say anything because I need this person to get the work done. So maybe I should stay quiet. So both are working. And we need to choose who we should listen to. Sometimes people make stupid decisions. One, just to give you an example, there was this guy who was doing an investor pitch. And at that time, I was an entrepreneur. I was doing investor pitch too. And there was an investor who was very, very hurtful in his statements. Kind of like, yeah, anyway. So I understood, and he was trying to find faults in the business plan, and I politely walked with him, and he was impressed with the answers. Moving on. The next guy who came, he was emotionally impulsive. He chose to listen to his mind. Guess what he did? He just as soon as this guy said, he took his laptop through the laptop wires and he was wild. He literally, physically reacted. Why? Because he was listening to his mind. I'm sure there were others who also wanted to react that way, but they listened to their intelligence and like, you know what? This is invested. I don't want to make a fool of myself. People are going to remember this. So I'm going to just take my anger and chew it up. So it's on us.
Okay.
So now the thing is, how do you know where to go? Are you in control or not? That's when you just breathe in, breathe out. You give yourself some time. They say count backwards, 5 to 1, right? Because you get that 5 seconds, now you are thinking straight. At least that emotional impulse of the mind is down. And you can think, should I do this? Should I not do this? Is it good for me? Is it not good for me? And accordingly, you act.
Yeah.
But if you go on impulse mode, boom, boom, and then you'll regret what you did.
Yeah. So it all depends on the outcome. We just want to think about the outcome after doing this. Maybe is that a way to?
Yeah, that is the whole point. You let the intelligence talk to you.
Yeah.
You think through this. You have to think before you react.
Okay. Yeah, got it. And even about the second verse, I am just wondering, like, is it for a normal human being to become a yogi? Because in the verse it says like, to be peaceful, right? So life is like a struggle. There are so many ups and downs, and even the human being will have some passion or a vision to achieve their dreams, right? So while achieving the dreams, there will be so many kind of ups and downs. So definitely the person will get depressed, or like it should happen, right? Otherwise we are saying like staying positive is good, but in times of depression or in times of bad things, we get anger, not anger exactly, but maybe little depressed, or say we may cry. So we are saying like all this should happen. If bad things happen, we have to cry. Otherwise all these emotions will be staying inside the mind and it may
Correct.
get burst, right?
Correct.
So I'm just thinking how this we can
Sure. So it is, the Bhagavad Gita is giving you something that's here. We will benefit even if you're here. Even if you can take 1% of that and activate it. So the thing you're saying, that there will be emotions, there will be depression, so those won't, so at an advanced stage of a yogi, those emotions, depressions don't even come out. They don't even happen. Because emotion depression is happening. Why? Because you're hurt. What if you have a bulletproof jacket that you cannot be hurt?
Okay.
You can be hurt only where you are soft, where you're weak, right? Somebody will know your weakness and hit you hard right there where it hurts. But what if you didn't have a weakness? You're strong. Then there is no question. Like, I could never imagine my grandmother leaving, her body. I will always be scared. Like, what if she dies, But by the time, Krishna was very kind, I had some knowledge of Krishna consciousness by that time. And when she passed away, not only I was with her, by her side, chanting every single day, but I was actually calm, steady, able to do all the last rites and everything in a very calm and peaceful way. Because it was very clear, she's not this body, she's spirit soul. And the soul never dies, the body is dead. And it's my duty to take care of whatever is the right thing to do with proper dignity and respect. I wouldn't be able to think straight if I was a fellow 10 years back. But by Krishna consciousness, those emotions, now, do I miss her? Absolutely. Even last night, I was thinking of her. But am I going crazy and crying and howling that I cannot live life without her? No. Okay. That's what it does. So wherever we can apply it, to that degree, we will see the benefit of it. It makes us stronger as a person, doesn't make us stone-hearted.
Okay.
In fact, a devotee is very soft-hearted, but not weak.
Yeah, so this balance is very important, right? Correct. So, yeah.
Emotional doesn't mean strong or weak. Emotional means emotional.
Okay.
Emotional means you get swayed by the mind here and there. You're unstable, right? Some people can cry very easily. Something happened, they'll start crying. Emotionally unstable. Some people can take a lot of stress and be completely under control and deal with all the duties with a clear mind. It's required to be a CEO, running a company, right? And that's what Krishna is teaching us. To the degree we can do that, to that degree we can think straight.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Lakshmi Mati is saying how to attain peace when there is so much stress and pressure at office. Complete day goes in chick chick. Yeah, so we start somewhere, right? We start somewhere. What is the starting point? We start by controlling the mind consciously. First, I talked about we recognize the mind's voice and us. There's a difference between the mind and us. Next thing is, now that you recognize it, bring the mind back, like Krishna is saying in text 26. Bring the mind back to now. So yeah, there's chick going on, right? All the politics, office, somebody's getting promotion who doesn't deserve it, somebody who deserves it not getting it. But you focus on what? Your knowledge. I have Krishna by my side, I have my karma, and whatever is best for me is the situation I have been given. In this circumstance, how can I make the most out of it? How can I make the most out of this circumstance? For that, you need clarity of mind to make the most of any given situation. You do that, and I tell you, I promise you, wherever you are in life, you'll only grow. Yeah, temporarily there might be failures, but even that failure will be an impetus for you to grow, because you're always looking for opportunities to make the best of that situation, versus blaming them and blaming Modi and blaming the government and blaming God and blaming whoever you can. Right? Blame game doesn't help anyone. When we see, okay, this is a situation, what to do in this situation, what's the best I can do? Keep practicing, bring the mind back. Mind, intelligence, I need your 100% effort right now, right here. What can I do best? Okay, you have a stand-up meeting with your mind and intelligence, and you take the decision and you go forward, right? That's how. Does it answer your question, Lakshmi Mataji? I hope it does. So Ragni Mataji is saying, haha, yes, Lakshmi Mataji, complete day go the chick chick. Akshat, how important is it to balance study, certification, logic, thinking, and spirituality? Study, certification, logic. Okay, so spirituality does not mean blind faith. I hope this is very clear so far, right? We have been reading Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna is not taking things on blind faith. He's asking questions, he's grilling Krishna, right? So spirituality requires intelligence. We should intellectually understand things. Now, there are some things we can intellectually understand. There are some things that are beyond our intelligence, right? So you have to understand that also, like bhakti. Bhakti is beyond our intelligence. Why does Lord Jagannath give causeless mercy without any logic? Bhakti is not logical. So deeper aspects of spirituality, not logic, not in our intelligence mode. That is something where you have to kind of, but so there is 3 aspects of knowledge. Quickly, I'll give it to you. Sambandha Gyan, Abhideya Gyan, Prayojana Gyan. So Sambandha means at the beginning stage, which is, if you see Bhagavad Gita is also like that, right? The beginning stage, Sambandha. What does Sambandha mean? Anybody knows? Yes, Indranath, you're muted.
So relationship.
Relationship, right? So Sambandha means relation. So in relation to me, what is around us, right? So we learn about karma, we learn about our mind, intelligence, ego, right? Chapter 2. Chapter 3, we're learning about sacrifice, food, rain. Chapter 4, we're learning about teachers, disciplic succession, how to get knowledge. So it's about Sambandha Gyan, knowledge about what's around us, how to connect with everything that we see, time, karma, knowledge, etc. Then comes Abhideya Gyan. Before Abhideya Gyan, I'll go to Prayojana Gyan. Prayojana Gyan is the end knowledge. That's Krishna, Vaikuntha, Goloka, right? Everything about Krishna, the ultimate goal, Krishna Prema. And Abhideya is a process to that end knowledge, Abhideya Gyan. The process is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vandanam, Archanam, Padasevanam, etc., etc. Right? Starts with hearing, like we're doing right now. We're hearing about Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's words. And then Shravanam, Kirtanam. We repeat, we share it with somebody. And thus we Smaranam, we remember it, right? And thus with proper understanding, now Archanam, we worship the Lord, etc., etc. So there's Abhideya Gyan. You know where you are, your current location in your GPS. your destination on your GPS, and how to get there. Abhideya Gyan. Please try to remember it, guys, and take notes if you can. So within that, that's the knowledge framework that we have. The Sambandha Gyan, intellectually you can understand. The Abhideya Gyan, intellectually you can understand. But the Prayojana Gyan, it's beyond intellect, because it's about Krishna. Nothing about Krishna makes sense, because his name is Adhokshaja. Adha Akshaja. Adhokshaja means he's beyond mind and senses. He's on a whole different dimension. We know 3D. 3D is max, maybe 4D. Krishna is on like infinite D. So even Krishna doesn't understand himself, right? That's why he came as Lord Chaitanya. So he doesn't fully understand himself, because by the time he understands himself, he's already grown, right? Krishna is expanding. So by the time Krishna understands himself, he's already expanded beyond his own understanding. So we cannot understand Krishna. It's not possible. So that's why the Prayojana Gyan part is beyond our intelligence. But everything else, we should use our intellectual acumen. We should use our questioning. We should verify, authenticate, practice it, get the aha moment, observe, conclude, and with full understanding, with full confidence, with full determination, go forward in our spiritual journey. Spirituality is not blind faith. Anybody tells you, attacks you on that, oh, you guys are spiritual, you're blind, you think the stone is God, right? No, there is substantial philosophy and intellect and, of course, observation behind it. If we didn't have any experience with Krishna, we wouldn't be here week after week learning Krishna's words. I'm sure all of you have somehow or other experienced something divine, some miracle, however small or big, that's been there. If not, I hope to God that you do experience it.
Good evening, Prabhuji. I just asked, how to follow dharma in this Kali Yuga? Like, what is the correct way? Like,
that's a very broad question, Siddharth. Can you be more specific?
Like in Dwapara Yuga, Krishna said, follow dharma, like what is going on right there. So in this Kali Yuga, what is the current situation? Like I need a clarity how to follow.
Dhyayatu Vishnu. So in Satya Yuga, it's dhyan on Vishnu. Treta Dijito Makhai. In Treta Yuga, it is doing fire sacrifices and great sacrifices like Ashwamedh Yagya, Gomedh Yagya, and things like that. Dwapara Paricharanam. In Dwapara Yuga, it is temple worship. Kalautat Hari Sankirtana. In Kali Yuga, it is chanting of the holy names of Lord Hari. In South India, they chant Vishnu Sahasranam, right? In Sri Sampradaya, not South India, I shouldn't say it like that, but in Sri Sampradaya, they chant Vishnu Sahasranam. In Nimbarka Sampradaya, I think they chant Radhe Krishna. In Brahma Madhava Gaudiya Sampradaya, we chant Hare Krishna. So like that, wherever you see, even in Islam, they chant Allahu Akbar, God is great, right? In Buddhism, they chant certain names of Buddha. They have beads. In Christianity, Hail Mary, Mother of God, right? So all religions, you will see chanting of the holy name is given a high priority. And that is what the Yoga Dharma for Kali Yuga is. Chanting of the holy name.
Chanting is all right, but like in this Kali Yuga, people are not like they're being very like they fool other people. Like how to like
we should focus on ourselves.
Okay.
We should not fool others.
Okay.
We should be examples. By our influence, others will learn.
Okay.
We cannot judge people, right? We have no control over other people. We are not authority. We are not police. We are not politicians. We are just who we are. But what we have control over is us. If we can be the best version of ourselves, the most honest, the most respectful, the most compassionate, the most patient, we can be the embodiment of Krishna's qualities that are coming up in future chapters. Krishna will tell you what are the good qualities of Sattva Guna. If we can have those qualities, then that we will make such an impact on society that others would want to be like us.
Okay, I got it, Prabhu. Thank you.
Now coming back to dharma, practicing dharma, there are 4 pillars of dharma, right? And 3 of them have been already broken in Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, only 1 pillar is remaining. Anybody remembers what are the 4 pillars of dharma?
Yeah, like austerity, cleanliness, and not hurting others, and truthfulness.
Mercy, yeah, very good. So truthfulness is only one that is somehow on the tottering platform, but other ones are completely broken. Mercy completely broken. Slaughterhouses, humans are being tortured, women rights, whatever, right? Mercy is gone. Austerity is non-existent mostly. Truthfulness is somehow there. We still pay our taxes. We still, there's a court system that somehow works. Truthfulness somehow there. Still, it's kind of shaky, but it's there. So that's the situation. So as dharmic people, we should uphold all these 4 pillars of dharma, right? We should be merciful to ourselves, to other living entities. We should be austere. That means we control our speech, we control our eating, we control what we accumulate, etc., etc. So that's also part of being dharmic.
Prabhuji, but every after every yoga there will be a war, and that is the lesson for after the other coming yoga, and these 3 yogas have been gone. So what would be the correct way of living, and what would be the learning from those yogas, and there will be a war in Kali Yuga also, and
Yeah. So it's not war. There is transition. So Kali Yuga is 432,000 years long. We are only 5,100 something years into Kali Yuga. So 427,000 years to go. I hope by that you'll go back to Godhead. You'll not have to see the end of it. But if you want to know the end of Kali Yuga, those of us who couldn't make it at the end, it's supposed to be horrendous at that time. Brothers will be eating, each other. There'll be the governments are supposed to be very, very oppressive. All kinds of terrible things that I don't want to talk about and depress you. But the point is, Kalki Avatar is supposed to come at the end. And when Kalki Avatar comes, it is said that he only annihilates. That's it. Paritranam sadhunam vinashacha dushkritam. Right? So it's only vinashacha dushkritam. He's going to be only annihilating the demons who will be remaining at the end of Kali Yuga. Because most of us who are some level of happiness or sincerity is there would have taken up this and gone back to Krishna. I pray that all of us are back by this lifetime itself. I hope that helps. Okay. It's already time. Navneeta has a question. I have a question. How do I know that I am growing in spiritual path? Sometimes I get thoughts like I'm doing the right thing, being in the right path. So Navneeta, first thing is, don't try to weigh things in the scale of right and wrong, right? That's when we are judging ourselves, when we are being hard on ourselves. Of course, there is right and wrong. I'm not saying stealing is right and you shouldn't have sense, but don't get into this mode of right and wrong with spirituality. In spirituality, there are certain milestones, just like it is described in the scriptures. When you're hungry, you have to eat, right? Nobody will tell you, you need to eat. You choose to eat. When you eat, nobody has to tell you, stop eating, enough. You decide based on, I am satisfied. I feel nourished. And I can eat no more. My belly is full. 3 indications that tell us that I am full, I shouldn't be eating anymore. There are some exceptions, of course. People who can eat voraciously, but just for common thing, I'm saying. Now, spirituality also, there are certain things Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita, like the yogi mind, right? Like Pinky Mataji said that, okay, how do I, going through this thing, can everybody become a yogi? Everybody can become a small yogi to whatever their capacity and grow that, right? So, and as we grow in that capacity, we will see detachment from matter, detachment from false prestige, false ego, right? Attachment to Krishna, attachment to spirituality. So this is a good litmus test. Is my attachment for hearing Krishna's words, hearing the holy name, chanting, towards Krishna as a person, his character, his name, fame, qualities, is that growing? We are growing, that means. Is my detachment growing from matter? Am I okay with, not having my 100% wish fulfilled? That means I'm growing. So both have to happen. It's not just detached from matter. Detachment from matter, attachment to Krishna. One has to reduce, other has to grow. As that happens more and more, you will know. In your own heart, you will know. And that is the indication that you're progressing in spiritual life. That means material things don't affect you as much. I know in your case, you deal with office politics and other things. You too have that issue. All the Hyderabad is having the same question, right? Anyway, so it is an issue and it is a problem, but you will see you're less affected by it, by how other people react, how they're politicking, how they're talking behind your back. It will less affect you, and you know you're growing above them, right? You're going above all these small nitty-gritty things. That's spiritual growth. There are other things also. Just point is, in Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna is saying, if you do this, this will happen. Just see if that's happening or not. If that's happening, that means you're growing. Right? But this is a basic litmus test. Attachment for Krishna, detachment from matter. All right. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Hare Krishna, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhupada.